My grandson sold my late husband's precious watch to take his wife to Rome. The dealership owner called me. I opened the drawer like I always did this time of year quietly, without turning on the light. My fingers knew the path. Left side of the bed, second drawer. Under the folded quilt George brought home from Okinawa in '72. There was never a need to look. For 46 years, that drawer had held one thing, and one thing only: his watch. But this time, my hand met emptiness. The quilt was there. The little cedar box that held my wedding ring was there. But the glass case with the leather strap and silver face gone. I froze. My breath hitched, sharp and dry. I knelt down, opened all the drawers. I pulled out socks, scarves, even an old Bible I had not touched since George's funeral. My heart beat faster. I checked my closet. I looked under the bed, inside the laundry hamper, even behind the bookshelf where George used to hide Christmas gifts. Still nothing. That watch was the only thing I had left of him. It was not just a watch, it was a promise. On the back, he'd had it engraved, "Until the ocean dries. G.W. 1969. He gave it to me before he left for his third tour. He said, "If something happens to me, this will tick for both of us." I staggered to my feet, knees aching, balance unsure. I grabbed my cane and made my way out of the bedroom. My fingers trembled on the hallway railing. Each step toward the living room felt heavier than the last. Ethan was on the couch, sprawled on the couch, arm around Lily, as though he owned everything. His arm was wrapped around Lily, who giggled as the television blared some travel special. Rome. The Colosseum. A couple kissing on a Vespa, laugh tracks and string music in the background. "Ethan," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Where's the watch? The one from your grandfather. I had it in the drawer. It's missing." He did not look up. His thumb scrolled lazily across his phone screen. "What watch?" "You know what watch. The one in the case. The one I polish every year on your grandfather's Memorial Day." "Oh, that," he said with a smirk. He finally turned toward me. "I sold it." My ears rang. "You sold it?" "Yeah." He stretched his arms over his head like he had just finished a workout. "That thing's ancient. Figured we could put it to better use." Lily chimed in, eyes never leaving the screen. "Paid for 2 plane tickets to Rome." "Isn't that romantic?" My knees buckled. I clutched the wall. Ethan chuckled. "Relax, Grandma. It's not like he's going to miss it. The man's been dead for years." "It wasn't yours to sell," I whispered. "That watch was." "A piece of junk," he snapped. "A dusty old souvenir. You keep living in the past. Me? I'm taking my wife to see the future." Lily laughed and kissed his cheek. "Besides, it was just collecting dust in a drawer. We gave it a second life." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the room apart. Instead, I stood there, the corners of my eyes stinging, the air too heavy to breathe. And right there, in the wreckage of that moment, I'm going to ask you something from one heart to another. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. I stood my ground, even as my whole body screamed to sit down. "That watch," I said, my voice now sharper, "wasn't just his. It held everything he didn't get to say, every moment he missed, every promise he kept when no one else would." Ethan rolled his eyes. "You're so dramatic. It's a watch, Grandma. And frankly, you should be thanking us. You never go anywhere. We're the ones doing something with our lives." I stared at him. This boy I once cradled. This boy who used to climb onto George's lap and listen to stories of the sea, wide-eyed and full of wonder. That boy was gone. "George gave you everything," I said. "He gave your father a roof when no one else would. He paid your school fees when your dad disappeared. And that watch? It was never for show. It was a symbol of time spent and sacrifices made." Lily shrugged. "It was just sitting there. Honestly, it felt like a waste." "No," I said, louder than I had in years. You don't get to decide what's waste. You don't get to erase a man because you want a better honeymoon. Ethan stood, finally, arms crossed. Let's not get melodramatic, all right? We sold a watch. Big deal. Get over it. I looked at him, really looked. And what I saw wasn't just a selfish man. It was someone who had mistaken convenience for entitlement, someone who had replaced legacy with luxury, someone who thought a flight to Rome was worth more than the heart of a man who bled for this country. I said nothing more. I turned around and walked back to my room. But inside, something had shifted. For years, I had kept quiet. Let them mock my old habits, laugh at my stories, ignore my memories. I stayed silent when they called me old-fashioned. I stayed silent when they told me I was in the way. But this time, they had touched something sacred. And in doing so, they awakened a part of me that remembered everything George ever stood for. I sat on the edge of my bed, hands folded, the drawer still open, its void echoing louder than words, and I knew, in that moment, that justice would not be loud. It would not be angry. It would be quiet, deliberate, and absolute. They had sold time. And now, time would answer back. They did not always hate me. There was a time when Ethan used to run into my kitchen after school, throw his backpack down, and ask for cinnamon toast, just like his grandfather used to eat it. There was a time when his father, too proud to say thank you, would leave gas receipts in my mailbox because he knew I paid them anyway. Back then, I was still Mom, still Grandma, still someone they trusted, even if they did not love me. But everything changed after George died. George was the kind of man who could stretch $1 farther than a preacher could stretch a sermon. He served in the Navy for 22 years. We moved 7 times, raised 2 boys, lived through lean seasons in wartime. But we never owed anyone anything, not a bank, not a soul. When he died, I found his final instructions locked in a safety deposit box at the Navy Federal Branch downtown. It was a typed letter, notarized, dated 3 months before his diagnosis. He wrote, "Belle, I know the kids will come asking for what I left behind. Do not give it to them, not yet. Not unless they prove they can carry our name without shame. The watch will decide. If it is still with you, untouched, that means they've honored memory. If it's gone, then you'll know." There was a number in that letter, a trust account, under both our names, but locked until certain conditions were met. The condition? That the watch remains in the family, untouched, unused, preserved. I followed it to the letter. When Ethan's father came to me 6 months after the funeral, he brought paperwork, brochures, and a real estate agent. "It's a golden opportunity, Ma," he said. "A retirement complex going up in Arizona. If we invest now, we can triple our money." I told him, gently but firmly. George asked me not to release anything until the time is right. He slammed his hand on the table. "The time is right when we say so. He's dead, Ma. This money could change our lives." I did not cry. I did not shout. I simply folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. "Then I guess your lives will have to wait." From that day on, I became the barrier, the stubborn old woman who stood between them and their dreams. They started talking about me in whispers. At first, I ignored it. But whispers have a way of becoming truths when repeated enough. Control freak. Cold. She's just sitting on it, hoarding. George wouldn't have wanted this. That last one, oh, that was the hardest to swallow. They didn't know George. Not the way I did. They knew the uniform, the medals, the man who gave strong handshakes and quiet nods. But I knew the way he cradled our baby when he had night tremors. I knew the way he gave away his last $20 to a widow from his unit without ever telling me. I knew the way he kept that watch ticking, even when he was too sick to get out of bed. But to them, I was just a vault they could not open. When Ethan turned 25, he asked me about the trust. I told him the same thing I told his father. "There are conditions." He frowned. "What conditions?" "Respect," I said. "Memory, honor." He laughed. "Grandma, you can't eat nostalgia. You can't pay rent with honor." I looked at him, this boy with his father's eyes and his mother's temper, and I realized the rot had already set in. Not just in the way he spoke, but in the way he believed he deserved something simply because he was born into it. After that, the kindness faded. Family dinners grew colder, invitations stopped coming. If I showed up, they sat me near the kitchen, away from the laughter. If I spoke, they cut me off mid-sentence. Lily was the worst. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone with a friend. She still wears his navy jacket like she's some war widow heroine. Can you believe it? The woman hasn't worked a day in her life, outside of frying eggs. All she's done is live off George's shadow, and now she thinks she gets to keep everything like she earned it. She laughed. She's lucky we even let her stay in the guest room. I stood in the hallway, just outside the doorway. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just listened. Because sometimes silence tells you more about a person than their words ever will. And so, I stayed quiet. I paid my own bills. I cleaned up after myself. I stayed out of their way. I watched my memories gather dust, watched George's photo frame yellow in the sun, watched my legacy become an obstacle in their path. They started calling it our money. They said it like I was borrowing from them, like I owed them something. And through it all, I kept that drawer closed, kept that watch polished, kept the silence intact, because I thought, maybe just maybe someday, they would understand that a man's life is not measured in what he leaves behind, but how it is honored. But they never did. They just waited. And when they grew tired of waiting, they acted. And now, the watch was gone. Not lost. Sold. Bartered for 2 round-trip tickets and a luxury hotel package. Better use, Ethan said. Romantic, Lily said. And what was I supposed to say? That I still slept with his picture under my pillow? That I still heard his voice in the tick of that watch when the nights were too quiet? No. They did not care. They did not care then, and they certainly would not care now. But George did. George cared enough to plan for this, to give me one last way to stand between our name and their greed, to give me a key not to the money, but to the memory. And now that key had been stolen. But what they did not know, what they could not know, was that George's protection did not end with death. They thought they broke me by stealing a watch. But all they did was wake the one part of me that never needed permission. The part that remembers. The part that forgives slowly, but never forgets. And the part that always, always settles accounts. I was trying to find a recipe. The chicken had been thawed since morning, and I thought I would make something simple, maybe stew, like George liked it, with carrots and potatoes that softened on the stove the way my hands softened with age. I turned on Ethan's tablet. He had left it on the counter again, and opened the browser, only to find TikTok already running. The video began, without me pressing a thing. There they were, Ethan and Lily, in Rome. Lily spun around in front of the Trevi fountain, arms outstretched, her sunglasses too large for her face, her voice a shrill melody. "Guess what paid for this trip?" she said, then winked. "Grandpa's time machine." Ethan laughed behind the camera. The angle shifted to show a hotel suite, white wine on a tray, a balcony view of the Colosseum. The video jumped to them clinking glasses, to room service, to Lily in a bathrobe with a towel on her head. "Thanks for the memories, Grandpa," she said with a wink, raising her glass. Or should I say, thanks for the resale value. My hand slipped from the counter. I clutched the edge of the sink to stay standing. It was not just the words, it was the tone. Mocking, triumphant, proud. I stared at the screen, watching it loop again. The caption danced in flashing letters. Number Rome honeymoon, number funded by Grandpa, number watch me now. They had turned George's sacrifice into a joke, into internet content, into entertainment. For strangers. For likes? I closed the tablet. My fingers shook too much to hold it. My breath came short, uneven. This was not private anymore. They had taken what was sacred and broadcast it. They turned grief into a public spectacle. And they did not even think of hiding it. Because they never thought anyone would stop them. They thought I was too old, too quiet, too slow. They thought I would stay in my lane. But George knew better. That evening, after dinner, silent and lonely, I sat by the fire with his letter. I had memorized every line. But tonight, I opened it again. The paper was soft with age, but the ink had not faded. There it was, the number, the clause. If the watch is ever sold, transferred, or modified without consent, the estate shall be frozen pending review. I picked up the phone. The number was long. I had to dial carefully. 3 times, I misdialed. My hands were not what they used to be, but I got through. Navy Federal Private Estate Services, the voice said. This call is being recorded. My name is Belle Walker, I said. I need to check the status of a conditional trust set up by my late husband, George Walker. Navy ID ending in 427. There was a pause. Thank you, ma'am. Please hold. A second voice came on the line a moment later, lower, slower, more careful. Mrs. Walker, we've been waiting to hear from you. My heart skipped. We recently received a security trigger from a partnered antique dealer in Virginia, the voice continued. A transaction involving a military-issued timepiece, serial number ending in 59. That's his, I said. His watch. There's an inscription, correct? Yes, I whispered. Until the ocean dries, G.W. 1969. Then I regret to inform you, ma'am, that the watch was recently offered for sale and temporarily held due to protocol. Because of the asset tag embedded in the clasp, a signal was sent through our legacy system. Per your husband's directive, this has automatically frozen all attached trusts and inheritance vehicles for review. I leaned back, gripping the armrest. So it had begun. George's protections, his final instructions, his faith that someday I might need something more than memories to defend his legacy. And what does that mean for the current named successors? I asked. They'll be notified, the voice said, but they'll be restricted from access until further assessment. That assessment includes moral review, asset misuse, and if necessary reassignment of the trust to a qualifying candidate as designated by surviving spouse. Me, I said. Yes, ma'am. I closed my eyes. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. I knew this was not over. I knew they would fight, that Ethan would throw a tantrum, that Lily would mock me, again. But they had underestimated George. They had underestimated the man who had seen war and peace and understood both required strategy. And they had underestimated me. Because I remembered. I remembered the first time I saw George wear that watch. I remembered seeing George wear that watch on the San Diego dock, salt on his collar. I remembered the nights he wound it by hand, even when Parkinson's made his fingers stiff. I remembered the sound of it ticking beside our bed when he could no longer speak. And they thought they could sell that. For what? A plane ticket. A hotel suite. A caption. Well, they sold time. But now time would speak. The next morning, I stood in front of my mirror and combed my hair. Slowly, deliberately. Not for them. For me. Because when the past is stolen, the only way to fight back is with truth. And mine was just getting started. The next morning, a black car pulled up to the curb outside Ethan's house. I stepped in without a word. The driver, a quiet man in a navy blazer, nodded and opened the back door. No one asked where we were going. They already knew. The branch was tucked inside a federal building, not the kind with teller windows or friendly pamphlets about retirement accounts. No, this one had no signage, no music, no candy bowls. Just quiet, gray hallways and cameras that blinked only when you noticed them. I was taken to a small room with a single chair and a brushed metal table. On the wall, the seal of the U.S. Navy, flanked by 2 framed photographs, both men in uniform, both long gone. A woman entered, older than me, somehow. Her suit was pressed so sharply it looked ironed with ice. Mrs. Walker, she said, I'm Commander Riley. Thank you for coming. She placed a small file on the table. She opened it slowly, deliberately, like it might sting her fingers. As you were informed, she began, the item in question, your late husband's issued timepiece, was flagged during a private resale attempt 2 weeks ago. A Virginia-based dealer scanned it during standard intake, which triggered a military-encoded distress signal. She looked up at me. I said nothing. Only 5 of these were ever issued with full legacy imprint. Your husband's was the last. The chip embedded in the clasp contains not just tracking data, but legacy trigger codes tied to our private estate system. I nodded. George always said he didn't trust paper trails. Riley smiled faintly. Your husband planned well. She tapped a key on the console beside her. A screen flickered to life in the corner of the room. There's something else, she said. We're required to play it if this level of breach occurs. The video began with static. Then, a familiar voice. George, if you're hearing this, he said, it means someone sold the watch. I felt every cell in my body freeze. I made this recording 2 years before I passed, George's voice continued. It's funny, isn't it, that I spent my life keeping time, and now time will keep me. He coughed. Lightly. Not pain, just age. Belle, if it's you watching this, then I'm sorry. I know what this must feel like. I know what they've done. He paused. I could almost see him, sitting at the kitchen table, his hands curled around a chipped coffee mug. I had to set the condition. I had to make it hard, because I knew if it were easy, they'd never earn it. The money, the house, all of it, it's just stuff. But that watch, that was memory. And if they sold memory, they don't deserve anything else. I felt tears press at the corners of my eyes. They think Rome is romantic. They think travel makes them cultured. But if they sold the one thing I gave them to remember me by, then they put pleasure above principle. And I can't forgive that. His voice softened. But I trust you, Belle. You always knew what mattered. If you're hearing this, it means it's your call now. Reassign the trust. Reclaim our name. The screen faded to black. Commander Riley turned the screen off. We've already frozen all accounts tied to the trust, she said. No funds can be accessed without your written authorization. You are now primary decision maker per legacy override. I sat still for a long time. When I finally spoke, my voice did not shake. What happens if I do nothing? She folded her hands. Then the assets remain locked indefinitely. The family receives nothing. The watch is retained by military records for historical preservation. I looked out the window. Rain had begun to fall, tapping against the glass like soft reminders. No, I said. I will do something. I turned back toward her. George gave them the chance to honor him. They failed. And what will you do now, Mrs. Walker? I inhaled, deep and sure. I will find someone who remembers what honor feels like. Someone who would never trade time for a plane ticket. Commander Riley stood. Then we're at your service. I nodded once. Thank you, I said. Then, more quietly, tell the system. Belle Walker remembers. And she's done being silent. Her name was Rachel. I remembered that much because when I had fallen outside the pharmacy last winter, she was the only one who stopped. Everyone else walked past me like I was part of the sidewalk. But she ran. No camera, no audience, no performance, just a pair of steady hands, a warm scarf, and the words, "You're not alone. I've got you." She stayed with me for an hour, waiting until the paramedics arrived. She gave them her number. She even called the next day to check in. She did not ask me for anything. Now, I was the one calling her. Mrs. Walker? Her voice on the phone was unsure, but gentle. Of course I remember you. Are you all right? I'm better now, I said, but I would like to see you. We met outside her campus dormitory. It was small, old, and smelled of rain-soaked brick. She wore scrubs under her coat, blue and frayed at the seams. I'm studying to be a nurse, she explained, brushing hair from her eyes. Geriatrics, I hope. One day. I thought you might, I said. She looked confused. I didn't blame her. I took her to a nearby diner. She ordered tea and a grilled cheese. I ordered nothing. I only watched her. How is school? I asked. Tough, she said, without complaint. Tuition's a lot, so I work nights at the rehab center, mostly sponge baths and paperwork. But the patients, they make it worth it. I nodded. Then I asked her, plain and direct, "Do you think caring for the elderly is a burden or a privilege?" She blinked. No one had asked her that before. "It's both," she said. "But mostly, I think it's an honor. To hold someone's hand when they feel forgotten, that's not a burden, that's a blessing." I felt something move in my chest, something warm, something I had not felt in years. Gratitude. Hope. "Rachel," I said, folding my hands, "would you come with me to see my attorney?" She looked at me, startled. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," I said. "You did something right." Later that week, we sat together in Mr. Harlan's office. He was George's old friend, retired JAG officer turned estate lawyer. He raised an eyebrow when I entered with a stranger, but said nothing. I placed the envelope in front of him. "Draw up a new beneficiary," I said. "Effective immediately. Mrs. Walker." "I am of sound mind," I interrupted. "And George left me discretion, I am using it." I turned to Rachel. "This is Rachel Mendez. She is 24 years old. She works nights, studies days, and she once saved me when I had nothing to offer in return." Rachel opened her mouth, but no words came out. "Effective this day," I continued. "All assets from the George Walker Legacy Trust are to be transferred to her, under condition." "What condition?" Harlan asked, pen in hand. "That she establish a fund," I said. "A real one, in George's name, the Watchwoman Fund." I turned to Rachel. "You will use it to help students like you. People who want to care for the forgotten. People who still know what it means to keep watch, even when no one is looking." Rachel's hands were trembling. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," I said, "and mean it." She nodded, tears forming in the corners of her eyes. "I will." Harlan looked at me, then at her. Then he smiled. "You always knew how to pick the right soldier," he said. I did not answer. I just looked out the window, where the sun was rising over the courthouse. George had once said, "Legacy isn't money, Belle. It's the memory people fight to keep alive." Rachel would fight for it. I had no doubt. They returned from Rome, suntanned and smug. 3 days later, Ethan tried to withdraw money for a new car. His card was declined. The next morning, Lily tried to access their joint account. Locked. Then the letter arrived, certified mail, bearing the seal of the George Walker Trust. The header read, "Notification of Inheritance Review and Interim Restriction." I was in the garden when the screaming started. Through the window, I heard Ethan's voice explode in disbelief. "She froze it? That old witch froze everything?" Lily followed shortly after. "She cannot do that. We need to fix this. Now." They thought they still had options. What they did not expect was that the house, the one they let me stay in like a stray pet, was no longer theirs to inherit. The title had been moved. The deed now bore a new name, mine. By the time Lily dragged Ethan into a downtown law firm, her heels were shaking and her voice had found a new pitch, desperation. They filed a suit that week. The accusation? Mental incapacity. They claimed I had been coerced, that I was senile, confused, manipulated by a stranger, that I had been tricked into giving away George's legacy. They thought framing me as a frail old woman would bring the judge to their side. But I am not frail, and I am not old in the way they hoped. When the court summoned me for psychological evaluation, I walked in unaided. The doctor smiled gently and offered a wheelchair. I declined. He ran his tests: memory recall, cognitive exercises, decision analysis. I completed each one, slowly but precisely. I recited George's Navy ID number. I recalled the coordinates of his last tour. I named every condition in the trust and cited the date of every amendment we made in the last decade. I finished the exam and looked the doctor in the eye. "Write whatever you want," I said, "but write it honestly." 2 weeks later, the report was submitted. Mrs. Belle Walker possesses full cognitive capacity, clear judgment, and no indicators of diminished mental function. Their case began to crumble. Then came my turn. My lawyer stood and walked to the judge's bench. "Your Honor," she said, "we'd like to submit evidence related to the defendant's character and actions leading up to the dispute." She played the video from the antique shop, Ethan on camera, smug, handing over the watch. Then the TikTok Lily at the Trevi Fountain, mocking my husband's legacy, captioned with laughing emojis. Then a third clip audio, captured accidentally during a dinner party weeks before Rome, when Lily whispered, "Once she dies, we're set. All we have to do is keep her alive long enough to sign the papers." The courtroom fell silent. The judge took off his glasses. He rubbed his eyes like he could not believe what he had just heard. But I believed it, because I had lived it. The ruling came swiftly. Due to evidence of financial manipulation, moral misconduct, and public defamation of a deceased veteran's legacy, the judge declared, the defendants Ethan Walker and Lily Walker are hereby disqualified from all current and future claims to the George Walker Trust. Gasps echoed through the room. But I did not smile. Not yet, because there was one more line. In addition, the judge continued, this court recommends the defendants be added to the Federal Estate Monitoring Registry under suspicion of inheritance fraud and elder targeting. They did not see that coming. Now, every major lender, insurance provider, and estate officer in the country would see their names flagged in red. They left the courtroom speechless. I left with my cane in one hand and George's photograph in the other. Justice is not loud. It does not scream or throw punches. It arrives like a door closing softly behind you. And on the other side, everything is different. The plane touched down in Rome just before sunrise. Rachel had never been out of the country. She pressed her face to the window like a child, whispering, "Oh my God." With every glimpse of tile rooftops and twisting alleyways, I let her marvel. She had earned it. I had no suitcase, just a carry-on with a folded flag, a photo, and a bouquet of white lilies tucked inside my coat. We stayed at a small inn, not the marble palace Ethan and Lily had paraded online, but something better. It had lace curtains, warm bread in the morning, and a balcony that overlooked a quiet cobblestone street. On the third day, we walked to the Tiber River. George used to say, "If I ever retire, Belle, take me to Rome. I want to see the water there. They say it's older than memory." He never made it. Wars, deployments, bills, then cancer. But I was here now. I carried the flowers down to the edge of the water. Rachel stood back, giving me space, a quiet kindness. She understood without words. The river was slow that day, golden in the light, timeless. I knelt carefully and laid the bouquet against the stone. "George," I whispered, "we made it." The breeze picked up, gentle and cool. "We're not here to sightsee," I said, "not to escape or pretend. We're here to finish what you started, to honor what you guarded, to pass it on the right way." I reached into my coat and took out his photograph. The one of him in uniform, eyes squinting, smile crooked. "I told you I would wait until they earned it," I said. "They didn't, but someone else did." Behind me, I heard Rachel's soft voice. "Thank you, Mr. Walker," she said. Later that week, the story broke. Widow of Navy veteran donates $2.7 million to caregivers in training. The article ran on every major network. Photos showed Rachel beside me, holding the plaque for the new fund, the Watchwoman Foundation, in honor of George Walker. One quote was repeated more than any other, because George used to say, "Love is care, not demand." I did not return home with souvenirs. I did not take a single selfie, but I did leave something behind, something better than a watch, a legacy. And this time, it was in the right hands. They say memory fades with time, but in Ethan and Lily's case, time remembered them too well. The Rome scandal followed them everywhere. News outlets had a field day with the phrase, "Sold Grandpa's watch for a honeymoon." Their faces were plastered across think pieces, radio debates, even satirical cartoons. The internet never forgets, and this time, neither did the people. Ethan lost his job within a week. Clients stopped returning calls. Former friends ghosted them one by one. Lily tried launching a blog to rebrand. Travel is healing, she called it. No one clicked. They moved out of the house they once dreamed of inheriting. The trust was gone, the accounts frozen, and no bank would touch them, not with the fraud alerts shadowing every application. Their new place was small, noisy, and smelled of mildew. The heater clicked in the winter, and the walls were thin enough to hear the neighbors argue at 2 a.m. That's when the package arrived. No return address, just a name stamped neatly in the corner. Bell Walker, Roma. Inside was a single photo, black and white, printed on fine paper. It showed me, seated on a bench along the Tiber River, smiling with George's framed portrait in my lap. Beside me, a young woman held my hand, Rachel. We were not laughing. We were not posing. We were remembering. Beneath the photo, a folded card. On it, in my handwriting, "Time remembers, even if you don't." They never spoke of it publicly, but a neighbor said she saw Lily crying on the stairs that night, clutching the envelope like it might disappear if she held it tight enough. Meanwhile, I stayed in Rome. I did not need the big house. The foundation covered my care. I moved into a quiet nursing villa run by the same school Rachel attended. They gave me a room with a garden view and a chair that did not creak when I rocked. Every morning, students passed by my door. "Good morning, Grandma Bell," they'd say. I taught one how to knit, another how to listen, not medically, emotionally. In the afternoons, I would sit near the window, working soft wool between my fingers. The world outside moved fast, but here, inside, time slowed down enough to feel. And in that stillness, I found peace. Not revenge, not triumph, just peace. Because people often mistake silence for surrender. But sometimes, silence is just memory sharpening its blade. I never needed to scream. I only needed to remind them. What is cheap to you may be sacred to someone else. And when you sell what time held dear, time will sell you back. So no, I did not get even. I got something better. I remembered. And I made sure the world would, too. Some mornings, I forget how old I am. The pain in my hips reminds me eventually, but just for a moment, before the light through the curtains shifts, and I hear laughter in the hallway. Not mocking laughter, not Lily's sharp, cruel kind. This is different, gentle, earnest, the kind of laughter that comes from healing. Rachel visits every Thursday. She brings pastries if she can afford them, or stories if she cannot. Either way, she always brings time. Not hurried minutes, not multitasked seconds, no. Real time. The kind George used to give. I teach the students how to fold hospital corners, how to make a bed so neat you could bounce a coin off it. I tell them about the old days not because I miss them, but because the past has so much to teach if someone's willing to listen. And they listen. One girl told me last week, "You make me want to call my grandma." I smiled and said, "Call her today. We don't always get next week." They call me Grandma Bell now, not out of pity, but out of love. I've become their resident compass, the quiet voice reminding them why they chose this path. Not for money, not for pride, but because somewhere, someone once needed them to care. Sometimes, at sunset, I sit by the olive trees in the courtyard. I carry George's photo in a small locket now, worn on a ribbon around my neck. I don't look at it every day. I don't need to. Because he's not just in the locket. He's in the way I still make tea black, 2 sugars, 1 stir. He's in the way I check the time by instinct, as though his watch is still ticking just beside me. He's in the way I say grace, even when the food is bland and the day has been long. Love doesn't vanish. It transforms. Into habit, into legacy, into the faces of people who finally understand what it means to hold another life gently. Rachel once asked me, "Do you miss them, Ethan and Lily?" I answered honestly, "No. I miss the boy Ethan used to be. I miss the child who believed in stories and saltwater dreams. But the man he became? The man who sold memory for a honeymoon? No, I do not miss that. But I do forgive him. Not for his sake, for mine. Forgiveness is not permission, it is freedom, and I earned mine. This place, this little villa in Rome, it's not where I thought I'd end my days, But maybe ending is the wrong word, because here, life hasn't ended, it's been reborn. One thread at a time, one story at a time. One watch ticked into forever. And when my time finally comes, I won't leave silence behind. I'll leave echoes. The kind that remind people, love isn't loud, but it lasts. And it leaves light in its place. Thank you for listening, my dear. If this story stayed with you, if it made you remember someone who gave more than they ever got, then don't let it fade. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories for more memories that refuse to stay buried. Stories of quiet strength, silent revenge, and the truths only time can tell. Because wisdom doesn't shout, it remembers. And here, we make sure it's never forgotten. Thank you for being here. I'll see you on the next story.